If you want to become a grandmaster, then you need to learn how to play chess in style. Basically, you need to have knowledge of positional chess. Now, I know a lot of you think this topic is very boring because you don't get to make exciting tactical moves like pins and skewers and discovered attacks and so on and so forth. But hey, true mastery doesn't just lie in playing with a sword. Chess is a real war. So if you do not have a sword, you should still be able to play as sharp as a sword. So, what is a positional chess? Well, all the moves that focuses on long-term strategic goals rather than the immediate tactical moves like playing pins and skewers and so on, then that playing style of chess is called as positional chess. So, what do players exactly aim when they are playing positional chess? Well, there are a lot of things that they try to improve in the game. For example, the overall position of their pieces, controlling key squares and lines on the board, creating weaknesses in the opponent's position, controlling the center, coordinating pieces optimally, and so on and so forth. So let's quickly dive into this interesting topic and learn how to play positional chess. Because I know deep inside, somewhere in your heart, you all want to become grandmasters, right? So let's learn how to play chess like a grandmaster. So there are few crucial ideas when you want to play positional chess, and one of them being create weaknesses in opponent's territory. So for example, this position, we are just in the opening part of the game, and here Anatoly Karpov, who was playing with the white pieces, came up with a move that created a weakness in black's position. Now, what was that move? So I'll give you 10 seconds to think. Well, I know it's still the opening part. How can we create weaknesses? Well, there is one move, and that move is bishop takes knight. It's a great move. Now, why is this move so great? Well, after this capture, pawn takes bishop, and now if you see, white has created a hole in black's territory, and that hole is the d5 square. Now, for all of you who doesn't know what a hole is, so a hole is a square which cannot be controlled by any of the pawns in the defending territory. So, since in the black's territory, this d5 square cannot be controlled by any of the pawns, this square has become a hole. Now, what does that mean? White can now immediately aim to place a piece over here and control some major squares in black's territory. So, white immediately played knight to c3 over here, with the aim to get this knight on the d5 square and control some of the key squares in black's territory. So coming back to the original position, so how did Anatoly Karpov came up with this plan? Well, he saw that the c pawn has already moved up. So the c pawn is not able to take care of this d5 square. The only pawn that can take care of this square is the e pawn over here, because it can move on e6 square, right? So in order to create a hole, Anatoly Karpov decided to exchange his bishop for the knight over here, after which this b5 square would be a complete hole in black's territory, of which white can easily take advantage of. Here is another idea to play positional chess. Minimize or create weaknesses in your own territory. Now let's understand this point with the help of this example. Black has just pinned white's knight over here, and because black has entered white's territory, white is really not happy with this move. So white plays h3 in order to kick the bishop over here, which is a good move. But guess what? The bishop doesn't go back and decides to stay on the same diagonal so that the pin can be maintained. So black plays bishop to h5. Now I know that most of you playing with the white pieces over here would not like this pin over here, right? But that's okay. At least the bishop is out of your territory. But a lot of impatient players over here end up playing g4 in order to attack this bishop over here. But guess what? With this move, you have just created weakness in your own territory, because you castled on the king side and now you have pushed the g pawn and have weakened these squares around the white king. And this may prove to be deadly going forward in the game. So therefore, do not play impulsive chess and make moves which creates weaknesses in your own territory. Here is tip number 3 to play positional chess. Now, oftentimes there might be pieces in your army which are not placed at a good place. So, for example, if I look at white's army over here, both these knights are well developed towards the center of the board. This bishop is nicely developed, the queen is developed, right? This rook is controlling the semi-open f file, which is good, but just look at this bishop over here, the light squared bishop. It doesn't have a life on this diagonal, and here sitting at the back rank, it's just doing nothing. So can we do something which can improve the position of this bishop? Well, this bishop currently is a bad piece, cannot be developed on these squares, cannot be developed over here, because it won't do much on these squares. So how do I make this bad bishop into a good bishop? Well, put it in a place where it's more active and doing something which aim towards the opponent's territory. So what would be a good move to put this bishop on? Well, obviously bishop to a4, because this bishop is now pinning this knight to the queen. Also, if you carefully see, the queen and the rook are placed on the same diagonal. So this bishop, which was earlier a bad piece in our army, is now putting so much pressure along this diagonal. Let's move on to tip number 4. But before that, like this video and subscribe to my channel for learning more such amazing content. Now, the tip number 4 is that first of all, spot weaknesses in your opponent's territory, and then once you spot them, fix them at that particular place so you can target them in the later part of the game. So if you have a careful look in this position, everything looks fine here in black's territory except for this pawn over here, which is kind of isolated on the b5, right? And because this pawn doesn't have any adjacent pawns to support him, to guard him, therefore this pawn is a weakness. And because this is a weakness, white should aim to fix this weakness at that very particular spot. And the way to do that is by playing the move b4. Such a great move. You spotted the weakness and now you have fixed it on the b5 square so that you can target this pawn with multiple pieces on the board. Now I know a lot of you must be thinking, why not just capture this free pawn? Well, if you do that, don't miss that you are also losing a pawn over here. So don't be in a hurry to grab pieces or pawns. Carefully look at the board and then play your best move. So b4 is the winning move over here. Because this knight is already putting a lot of pressure on this pawn, black decided to exchange this knight with his bishop. So bishop takes knight, rook takes bishop, and we have reached a position where the material is e1, but there is an imbalance in the position, and that imbalance is that white has a light squared bishop versus black's knight over here. And if you see, white's bishop is so strong that it totally dominates this diagonal, and in comparison, black's knight isn't that active, isn't well placed, and isn't going to be much of a help to black. Also, not to forget, black has a weakness over here on b5, which he constantly needs to take care of. So considering these points, white has some winning advantage in this game. Now, next important point to consider is always try to maintain a healthy pawn structure. Now, look at this position over here. King and a pawn endgame. Both the players have equal material, but white has tremendous advantage in the game. Why? Because just look at the pawn structure. It's so well connected. White doesn't have any weaknesses in his position, but look at black's position. Black has like 1, 2, 3 and 4 pawn islands versus white's 2 pawn islands over here. So clearly, though the material is equal, white has an advantage because white has a better pawn structure over here. So going forward, and because white has a better pawn structure and doesn't have weaknesses in his structure, it's easy for white to win this game because all of these pawns are isolated, double pawns, and they cannot protect each other. And soon the white king can just aim to go towards these pawns and start targeting them one by one. So just being equal in material isn't sufficient. You also need to have better pawn structure, especially in the endgame. Now, next important thing is to make sure that your king is always safe, because chess is all about checkmating your opponent's king. So you don't want to take your king's safety lightly at any point of time in the game. So for example, look at this beautiful situation on the board. Black is up in material by 2 points, but white is putting immense pressure on black's g7 pawn over here. Also, the h file is semi-open. This knight is ready to jump at any point of time and start launching an attack on black's king side. And this bishop is also kind of nicely placed, aiming at this diagonal. So if you look at white pieces, they are so well placed that they are ready to start an attack. So black is aware of this. Black knows that if white starts an attack, it could be deadly. So black really wants to get rid of all these attacking pieces. But how can he do that? Now you may be thinking that, hey, black can play f6, because that way he is attacking the bishop and asking him to retrieve back. But guess what? That move doesn't work, because if you play f6, you have weakened your king side, and now you're allowing white, you're provoking white to blast open your king side with a beautiful sacrifice. Knight takes f6 check. If knight takes knight, then instead of capturing this knight over here, there is another in between move, and that is bishop takes e6 check, double attacking this rook over here while also attacking black's king. It's a fork attack. King is forced to move on the h file. If he goes to the corner, then he will get mated in just 6 moves. And if he goes to the h7 square, and now white can continue the attack with queen h4 check. If knight blocks, then it's a checkmate. So therefore, king is forced to come out on the board to the g6 square. And now since your pieces are beautifully controlling the escape squares of the king, it's time to bring another attacker to the king, and that is f4. You're threatening to mate over here. So black will try to delay this checkmate with bishop e4, sacrificing his bishop. And now white can simply capture this bishop. You are threatening checkmate one more time. So black might try to play c4, checking your king. King moves to h2. And now because there is this checkmate threat, queen will capture the bishop. But f5 check anyway, forking both the pieces. Black is losing his queen. Queen takes f5. And now rook takes f5, bringing another attacker against the black king. And you see how terrible black's position have come to. White is up in material by 5 points. This rook is ready to jump on the f file. This bishop is nicely sitting on this diagonal. This queen is controlling this file. This rook is controlling this file. And black's king is just stuck near the white pieces. And it's just a matter of time that white will soon convert this game into a win. So let's go back to the original position. So here, though white is putting a lot of pressure over here, black needs to be careful and cannot just go on play f6, weakening his king side. So black needs to be patient here. He has to take the safety of his king very seriously. So what is the best move for black over here? Well, the best move is, first, before playing the f6, you need to make sure that all of the squares around the black king are controlled in a good manner. So if you play f6, this diagonal would be weakened, right? These squares would be weakened. So that is why black here plays bishop to e8 first. So if you move the pawn, these squares won't be weak anymore because the bishop would be controlling, right? So black plays bishop to e8. White moves the queen over here, and now before moving this pawn to f6, black now first plays rook to d7, because after you move this pawn, this rook would be controlling the entire 7th rank, making sure that there is no counter activity coming from white's side. White gets his rook on the e file, and now black plays f6. And now if white tries to sacrifice his knight over here, then that's not going to work, because knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, and after bishop takes knight, black can simply play knight to d5, attacking the bishop over here. If bishop comes to e5, then rook can jump on the f7 square, taking control of the semi-open file and making sure that black's king is completely safe and well protected over here. Another important thing to consider is that you should always look for opportunities that restrict the movement of your opponent's pieces while also grabbing more space for your own pieces. So here it is white's turn in the game, and can you find a move which grabs more space for white and also restricts black's pieces? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think. So the move that gives lot of advantage to white over here is queen to d6. Such a great move. Because of this move, this pawn is not able to move forward. The queen is stuck over here at the back rank. The bishop would have a hard time developing because these pawns are just on the light squares. So black will have to waste a lot of moves in developing his bishop, in developing his queen, in getting these rooks out. So it's going to be a hard time for black to actually make his pieces mobile over here. Another important thing to look for while playing positional chess is to exchange your bad piece with one of opponent's good pieces. Now, if you look at this position over here, in white's territory, there is one bad piece. and that is the knight on a4. It's sitting on the side of the board, and you all know that a knight on a rim is grim. And which is one good piece that the opponent has? Well, it's this dark squared bishop over here, because it's nicely controlling this diagonal on which the white's king is sitting too. So how do we get rid of our bad piece with black's good piece? Simply exchange it. So knight takes bishop is a very good move in this position. And last but not the least is to make sure that the central is always in your control. The center squares, because whoever controls the center of the board controls the flow of the game. So let's quickly look at an opening. E4, C5, knight F3, knight C6. This is the Sicilian defense. We all know. D4, white is going for the open Sicilian. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. And now G6. Black is planning to fianchet to the bishop and also attack white's strong centralized knight over here. So there would be double attack over here. But white plays c4, taking control of the center squares, and now bishop to g7. Now there is double attack on this strong central knight over here, and instead of going for an exchange and giving up your strong knight, white plays bishop to e4, developing another piece as well as adding one more defender to this knight over here. Black plays knight to f6, developing a kingside piece as well as attacking the unprotected pawn on the e4 square. White responds with knight to c3, controlling the key central squares as well as providing defense to this unprotected pawn. Black castles, and now white plays bishop to e2, simply developing another piece and preparing to castle. Black plays d6, white castles, bishop d7, queen d2, a6, and now white plays f3. And just look at this position over here. Who do you think have a stronger control of the center? Well, obviously the white pieces, because both these pawns are doing a very good job of controlling this key d5 square. This knight is also controlling this d5 square. This knight is controlling this square. White has formed a pawn chain, so it's very difficult for black to get rid of this strong e4 pawn over here. White has a piece, a strong knight placed in the center of the board. The rooks are ready to jump on the c and d file, and white has got a very good advantage out of this opening because of the moves he chose to play. So therefore, if you want to have advantage in the game, make sure that the center is always in your control. Though black is also putting some pressure on the central squares, but he hasn't got very good control of these squares. The control isn't as strong as white has over these squares. Now, since you have learned many ideas of playing a better positional chess, let's see if you can solve today's question of the day. So here is a complex situation on the board. The material is equal and it is black's turn to play, and there is only one move that gives tremendous winning advantage to black. So can you find the winning moves for black over here? Let me know your answers in the comments box, and I'll see you in the next video.